This week on SV Lynx.
All right. So it may not be perfectly sticky.
Tuesday after a holiday here in the United States called Memorial Day. And so we took the holiday off, but we're going to work Thursday, so we're really not actually getting any days off. We just rearranged our day. Extra days. So right now we're trying to get some more slats on here, and for these ones in the center where there's not as much twist, we're trying to use some of the original red cedar that came with the kit. Back here. We got one in already, and we're trying another one. Now, if it doesn't work out, we have one of our two-part cedar strips ready to go. So we'll replace it if it breaks. We won't have to wait. And there you go. And that's what happens with these. They just don't hold. This one's been setting up now for 2 weeks. So it's not like it didn't have a chance to harden, but it did not work.
Now I should note that that was one of the original joints, not the double rabbit or longer cuts.
We don't want to get too excited here because this is only half. We got to go down the other end with it. And it has to survive for a few hours before that, without that joint letting loose. The issue with inland cedar, which these are western red cedar and these are inland red cedar, and the problem with inland red cedar is along the coast the trees grow larger and there's fewer knots. With inland red cedar they're little smaller trees, and so there are more knots in them. So for example, there's a knot right here that we're a little worried that it'll break. Mud is holding so far. Halfway. Oh, old hole. All right, that was the last of the full width ones that we're going to do. So now we're going to be going to half size, because this is going to get a much steeper curve and therefore much more twist and much more difficult. But so far so good.
It'll slow down.
Yep. That was this joint letting loose over time. So we're going to have to take this joint and recut it, do a double rabbit joint here, and see if that'll help. Alright, well, time to get started on the outboard side sanding. So we'll begin up at the front here and work our way back. Brian's busy taking off the rest of the screws and washers that I didn't get out yesterday, or actually Saturday. So time to get rolling on this. So into the bunny suits we go.
goal today on sanding was to get half the hull done. And I'm nearly there right now, and Brian's doing the stern right now, so we're actually going to get more than half done, but we'll probably be knocking off pretty soon here. All right, so that is our goal of the day. Sorry about that. To get about halfway done. And you can take a look and see that that's coming out just like the other side, but even easier. This one's much faster than the other side. And so getting a very nice smooth hull there. Brian's here working on the stern, and it's looking like it's coming out very nicely as well. So some of the tough area, because these boards come in at a super high twist, so have to do a little extra sanding on the edges. All right, I think we're going to wrap up. I've reached the point where I wanted to, and my arms are tired. Well, that's enough for today. Half a hull in one day is half a side of a hull is plenty good. So we will wrap it up for today. Tomorrow we're going to get the rest of it done. So we'll have it done in 2 days, and then we can start work on the front of this. But that isn't all we got done today, because as you can see, we've got a lot of the boards on, and we've only had one issue, which is this joint right here let loose. All right, well, we're fixing that joint that didn't hold on the beam here. So we just extracted that board out and took it over to the table saw that we just had out a minute ago. And we cut a double rabbet in here, so like so. And then what we're doing right now is we put unthickened straight epoxy on here, and we're letting it cure up a little bit. And this is something that we got off of the West Systems website area on how to do this better. What they want you to do is use unthickened epoxy at first, let it soak into the wood, cure up just a little bit, and then apply thickened epoxy to seal up the complete gap, any little gaps completely. So we're letting it set. This is fast setting epoxy right now, so it's not going to take too long before this gets to a point where we're ready to apply the thickened epoxy. We'll let this cure up a bit. Now, we did the same thing on these two joints here that we did earlier today. That'll be for tomorrow when we put the last two pieces on. But for those, we didn't cut a double rabbet joint because these long ones with the joint in the middle are having no problems with the straight 30-degree cut. And so because this is right in the center with no twist, this one, on the other hand, being right out at the end here, gets the full twist on this joint. And so that's why we went with this a longer 30-degree and double rabbet, and doing this non-thickened and then thickened epoxy method here. So it looks like it's about ready now to put some thickened epoxy in here. So this one will squeeze out and get all of the little holes filled. So as you can see, we've got full squeeze out on that joint now. All right, we'll see you tomorrow, and try to get that last three now, these last three boards in, and then we can start epoxying them in Well, it's another gray May day, and that's fine as long as it's not raining on us. Cool weather's actually kind of nice while we're sanding. It's nice and cool in those bunny suits. But before we get to sanding today, the first thing we're going to do is try to get these last two very extreme twist and bend boards on that we glued yesterday. And the first one is ready to go right now, but we'll see if this thing is going to twist and bend down in. I have my doubts, but we're going to give it a try. And we're not going to kerf it. Instead, what we decided to do on these last two is we cut them thinner. And we did take a test piece at this width and did bend it into place, and it managed to bend. But that was a test piece. Now we're going to try the real one. So we'll see how it goes. So these are the easy ones. Now we'll start getting to the fun stuff. You see that one sticking out in the air over there? Gently. That was the tough one, so we're looking good. It'll be an excellent day if they all hold like that. We're trying to get these in now, even though we're going to be epoxying these ones today, but we want these to start taking the bend, have them sit on here for a day or two before we take them off to do the epoxy part. All right, it's in. So for this last one, you can see there isn't much space here, so we're going to have to cut just a sliver of a board to fill that in, and we may not even be able to put a screw in this on here. A few of these, yeah, but down here it's pretty skinny. Okay, we're down to the last strip for this piece here. I know there's one missing in the middle, but that's gluing. This one we had to cut on the table saw and bevel it off to be flat. So it had to match up right here against this part here, because when we put the top piece on, it'll also have to come in and match up right there. We had to cut that, and it looks like it's all right, but that means that there isn't a lot of board left here to put screws into, so we don't have room for the washer, so we're just going to go with screws. That's all we want. This board is so thin that I don't think it'll have any trouble making the bend. But if there had been any knots in this wood, that would have been a disaster. So we saved the best piece of wood we had that had no knots for this. Yeah, these are curving in no problem because the board is so thin that it bends easily. And this is why we didn't have to do the kerf we were considering doing, because in essence, instead of cutting just a kerf through part of this board, we just cut the whole board thin, and it's actually going to make it easier to epoxy because we don't have to get epoxy up through the kerf. We just didn't know this will make the bend or not and have enough room for screws, but it just does. All right.
One direction.
Now we gotta get the other side. This is not hard work, it's not difficult. It's just the boards are breaking. If they weren't breaking, we'd have been done with this thing in short order. There you have it. We have our nice curvature up there. We'll have to use some clamps to get these middle parts in a few places to line up. But that pretty much gets one half of this thing down. And like I say, once this one's done setting up the epoxy for a bit longer, we can put this board in. We don't need that board today because we're only going to epoxy in these 4 boards for today. And it's all we'll have time to do on these because we have to clamp them and such. And so we'll do these 4, and then that'll give us another day to set up, and then we'll put this board in and 2 or 3 more. And the next day we'll do the last 4 or so. So it'll take us about 3 days. We took the screws out of this first board. You can see how much of the twist and bend it's retaining from having been in that position for a couple days. So that's good. All right, well, we're putting down the first epoxy on, it's actually the second board because the first one's still screwed on, so we don't need to remove it. So this is B. And we'll see how this goes. This is our first try at this. Fortunately, it's very similar to strip blanking the hull, so we have some techniques down. So to speed things up, we're doing 2 slats at a time so that we can clamp them together.
That'll cut down the curing time.
So we're just quickly clamping in the center of each one of these so they get these boards in line. They're in line where the screws are, but they can tend to bow apart. Like over here, that center one's low. So we're just putting a clamp in the middle of each one of these. What was that? You gotta clean off the underneath of it all?
Yeah.
All right, well, we finished sanding this entire hull, both sides. But there are a lot of spots on it that we have to fix. For example, there's little tiny gaps like this. And if we look along further here, here's a little spot. And we also have to, of course, fill all these holes. But right now what we're doing is looking for all these little tiny gaps in where the epoxy didn't squeeze out well enough. Or here's a little gap up there at one of the seams. So there's little places that we have to fix. Not too many along there, but here's a little spot here and here. So we talked to Schionning about this, and they said that we just need to rough it up a little bit. So we took a Dremel and a wire wheel, and we roughed up down into any of those little cracks and holes so that the surface is roughed up. And then they want us to mix up some epoxy with some microspheres in it and silica and fill them all. And any low spots that are more than like 2 or 3 millimeters are not smooth. Well, let me show you one of those. Over here, probably hard to see, but right here, this little tiny triangle that came in, this dipped down a little low right here. And we don't want to take and sand these 2 boards down to that level because that'll take out way too much of these boards. So instead we roughed this up, and we're just going to fill in a little bit of that with epoxy. But in other areas where it may not be perfectly smooth somewhere. As long as it's a smooth transition, even if it dips in just slightly, we don't fill any of that. We'll put in the basalt go over the top. That'll level that up a little bit, and also the fairing compound on that will completely take care of that. So right now we're going to go ahead and finish up some more sanding. The other thing that we did is we just felt along the hull and found little spots that were still too rough. And so everywhere that we found a spot, just rubbing our hand and feeling, we marked a little S so that we can go sand those right now and fix those spots up. I'm going to sand all those little S spots, and Brian's going to jump in with our Flexi sander and just start going over the entire hull and smoothing the entire thing out, because we've only done this with our flap disc or Bondo disc, whichever way you want to call that. And so right now it needs to be smoothed out a little bit more. So he's going to go through the whole hull on this side with the Flexi sander, and I'm going to go catch those spots that we marked with an S. Okay, today we got on the next two boards, and we're on to the center ones right now. And as you can see, they're coming in here quite nicely. So they're coming in just fine. And we've got them all braced, and Brian's cleaning up the excess epoxy. Are you not?
I am.
So that's as far as we can unfortunately get on these today, and the reason is that this one right here is still setting up, and we because it's one of the ones with a seam here, we want to give it a couple of days here to really set up, because we don't want to snap another joint somewhere right in here. So we don't want to do that one today. We'll do it tomorrow. So tomorrow we're probably only going to get maybe 2 or 3 in here, so that's going to leave one more day that we're going to need to work on these. So that means probably Saturday we'll finish the epoxying. And that means we won't get to the biscuit insertion on these and gluing in and carbon fiber first before then. I'm getting in Brian's way now. So, but good progress, and it's working at last, and these are all going in nicely. So we're quite happy with that. So today we've got some more slats here on the Forebeam, and we did a lot more sanding on the hull, and also some prep work for patching. And tomorrow we're going to do some patching on those areas that we prepped, and more of these slats, and may do some sanding on the other side of the hull, on the inboard side of the porthole. This morning I got up early at 5:30 a.m. and had a couple of meetings. The first one with Combi, one of our sponsors, and I wanted to go over what the status was on our electric propulsion system. And Brian's throwing things at me over there. And so what happened was they had some surprise for me. Early on, I asked them if they had a propeller shaft decoupler. And the reason I wanted that was so that I could disconnect the prop from the diesel, run the diesel while at anchor, turn the electric motor, and therefore turn that 25 kilowatt motor and diesel engine into a generator. But they didn't have a decoupler, and they did say they would check with some companies and see if they could find one for me to purchase. So that was a while ago, and now they have come back to me and said, well, we have good news. We now have made our own magnetic decoupler, which means that instead of a manual one where I'd have to go down into the hull and go to the stern cabin and throw a lever to decouple the shaft, I could just flip a switch at the helm, and that magnetic decoupler will disconnect the prop shaft. And that makes our generator work. And then when we're ready to go, I just flip the switch up at the helm and we have the diesel hooked back up to the prop. So the good news is for me, even better news is, that's now all going to come as part of that unit. And they're remaking all of the brackets for the Nanny N4.80 engine that we had. And they had to custom make those to begin with for our setup because they'd never done a Nanny before. And now they have to redo those so that it works with their new magnetic coupler. And so that means they have to make all new brackets for it. And they're going to do this free of charge for us because they're sponsoring us. And they're giving us a very nice discount on that decoupler as well. And so what a sweet deal for us. So now it's all going to come as one unit. We will only have to get one prop shaft that just goes from the prop straight up to connect to their system, and that's it. Before, we were going to have to cut in 2 different pieces for another company's decoupler, and it was just going to be a big hassle. So that was really wonderful news. In fact, this is a diagram of the new decoupler and the new bracket that I'm going to show you right now. So you can see that down here, you have the pulley that comes down from the electric motor, and that goes down to now, right here, is the decoupler, and then that goes to the prop shaft there. So that's the new system, and we'll have some video about it and such in the future and show you more about it, but I was really excited to find that out. Then I had a meeting with Schionning, and I got more good news. In the Schionning meeting, it turns out the ship that was coming from South Africa had gone up to Europe, and from there it was supposed to head across to Los Angeles, and I was watching that, and suddenly it changed, and it was no longer going to Los Angeles, it was going into the Med. And that meant instead of getting here somewhere in July, it was going to get here in August or September. Holy crow, more delays for the Sycamore. But Schionning got on the phone and they fixed it. They transferred that shipping container from that ship to another ship, and that ship is going to get it here sooner than it was coming. So we're going to get it this month in LA. So that was really good news with Schionning about the shipment coming, and also just a lot of information about how we're going to be doing the carbon fiber on the Forebeam, how we're going to be putting the basalt over the hull, how we're going to do a few little repairs on here and the best way for us to do that. A lot of different information that we got this morning. So another very productive meeting, and thanks to Robert Quinn, who helped me out a lot with a lot of information this morning. So that's just a little update on things that are happening and the good news about the Sycamore and the new magnetic decoupler for us, which is a big deal since that was on my nightmare list, the things that I worry about when I'm sleeping, because we just hadn't solved that yet, and now it's even better. So it's awesome news. All right, off to work again.
We're reconfiguring a couple of the cubes we built earlier, and what we're going to do is put some supports in and then put plywood up here on top. And while John and I are over working on sanding the hull, Marianne and Brian are figuring out and screwing in all of these 2x4s to support the plywood. These will be useful for us because we need these platforms to both work on the bulkheads we're about to do, to route out the edges and such, and we need a flat surface to do that on. And also later we'll reconfigure these particular cubes to support the cabin top when we build that part of the boat.
Okay, now we're going to screw down the plywood.
So I'm here with John, and he helped us before on this. He was here the day we unloaded the whole thing, and other days when we were sorting things and stuff. And what we're looking forward to is not the work that John's going to do for us, but going sailing with John and seeing some parts of the world on this little thing here.
Absolutely. Yeah, last time I saw it, it was all in pieces, and now it's starting to look like a boat.
Yeah.
A lot of work still, but it's starting to look like a boat.
Yeah, it is. We're about 6-7 weeks in right now. We expected to have this done faster than that, but the thing is that we rearranged our schedule some, and we started working on other parts like the Forebeam stuff. So we're not actually behind, even though we expected to have this a little further along. We weren't in a hurry to get this too far because the Sikkim and Epoxy was delayed. But as I mentioned on our earlier today, actually earlier this week, that we got good news and the Sikkim is now coming in 4 weeks, so it's a good deal. So we're gonna have John go back to work. He's gonna help Brian with the rest of the table, and Marianne and I are gonna get started on cleaning up this whole, he's already blown out all the dust, but we're gonna use some acetone and start cleaning up so that we can get some epoxy on a few low spots and fill all these holes. All right, John, thanks.
Looks good.
Here we are at Saturday, and we're working on the Forebeam today. We've already got one plank on, and we're going to put another one on now after we take the clamps off.
We don't wait until the epoxy is fully cured before removing these clamps. We just want to make sure that it's set up enough that will hold the plank without letting it move. And then we can just pull the clamps off and peel off the plastic that keeps the clamps from sticking to the epoxy.
We're looking for eye. Going to be one of these curvy ones. Let's look at this one right here. Eye, that's it. All right. Over your head.
Because we left the strips screwed down for a few days, they've now taken on pretty much the same curvature as the form already, so they're a lot easier to bend into place. Now it's time to apply our thickened epoxy to the top edge of the board. We did a quick test on this bulkhead and then put it back, but we're starting to get ready to start routing out the edges of some of the major bulkheads on here. But while we're doing that, Marianne went to the porthole and started putting epoxy into some of the gaps where the epoxy had pulled back as it cured. But while she did that, Brian and I got out one of the major bulkheads to start work.
So this is our first bulkhead piece that we're going to start working on. We are going to router out the foam to give us the space to put in our epoxy rope to support all the way around. Then we'll do a second one and put them together. We'll be good to go.
We just routed out this part here, which I'll give you a tight shot of, you can see. But the router bit isn't wide enough to get both. So what we're going to do is we're going to route out all of the top of this whole panel. Then we'll flip the panel over and do it again and cut out the rest of this here. So there's spots on these where we have to cut through instead of following the edge. So if you look down here, this will come along and we'll have the rope, and the rope continues straight through like this. And that's because they don't want this to do 90-degree turns on that. And so in this case, what they have us do is cut a trough in here, but we leave the laminate on the bottom side, and we take the rope that's coming through, inset between the laminate, and then we just continue it through this trough and on out. So that's what we're cutting there. So we use a different router bit for that.
Now that we have the construction finished on our tables for working on big items, next week we're going to work on the bulkheads.
Now we got the first of the bulkheads cored out, but next week we're going to start rolling the rope and filling those voids along the edges and troughs and working on all the rest of them. There's about 6 of these major bulkheads that we have to work on and seam together. So we'll do that, and also we're going to start laying carbon fiber inside that Forebeam now.
Yay!
Finally, taking a little while to get there. So that's next week. But for this week, we'll just like to say thank you all for watching. We really do appreciate you. And I just wanted to mention that we love all of the comments, and I really enjoy reading them and replying to them, but mostly just the reading of them and all, not just the suggestions, but the well wishes and all that good stuff. It really keeps our spirits up reading your comments. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to our patrons who are helping with our project greatly. So we'll see you next week for our next video.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified of that next video.
That's true. So we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.